Welcome, everyone. You are tuned in to the Xhale podcast, where your hosts Eric Strauss and Rodman Lees talk about anything and everything spearfishing, as well as getting into some off topics. So go ahead and get suited up because we're going to dive right into this episode. This episode is brought to you by the Xhale Spearfishing Store. Located here in Jupiter, Florida, they've got all the gear you need to get out on the water today. Also, check them out on their website, xhalespearfishing.com.
I like the two cameras, though.
We'll get back to a two-camera setup pretty soon. But we are recording. We are live. We're not live. We used to be live.
We used to be live.
Anyway, welcome, everybody, to the Xhale podcast. I'm your host, Eric Strauss, and I'm here with Rodman Lees as well. Rodman, how's it going?
Good, man. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening. We have attempted this, let's call it episode 1 of the Xhale podcast.
There you go. Season 3.
Season 3, episode 1. It might be season 4. I think we might have done a season 3.
Nice. Why not?
It was like 2 episodes long.
Why not?
But yeah, welcome to back to the Xhale podcast. We're back in action. We have some pretty big things to talk about, at least getting started off the bat here. And I guess we'll just go right into it with the first item of concern.
The new studio.
The new studio, which is more than just a new location. You can't see all of it on camera. You can see some of it. You can kind of see the
So we're in the workshop right now, behind the workbench. Behind us we got, guns, gear, all that kind of stuff. Eric is now the proud proprietor of a new freediving shop in Jupiter, Florida.
Spearfishing shop.
Spearfishing. What did I say?
Freediving.
Freediving.
It's a free dive shop.
Fair enough. No,
but
I think that's
more so I want to identify as a spearfishing shop rather than just a free dive shop.
I think that is, while might be just a small difference to some people, I think that is a important distinction. That's not just
the reason.
Ain't just whistling Dixie. Hey yo.
I just run it. The reason I wanted to make that distinction is because, especially here in Jupiter, it's not all free divers that are spearfishing. It's a lot of free divers that spearfish, especially because we have such good access to the Bahamas and stuff like that. And over there, it's only free dive for spearfishing, right? But there's a lot of guys that scuba dive here. And even in the past, at other dive shops that I've worked at in the past, I had a lot of customers that were scuba divers that would come to me to work on their spearfishing gear. So I don't want to make those people feel excluded by coming to a free dive only shop.
No, and when you say a free diving shop, it should be about freediving. This shop is not about freediving. This shop is about killing fish.
Yeah, it's a spearfishing shop.
It's a spearfishing shop. There's no mono fins. There's no
I might make fun of you a little bit if you come in here as a scuba diver, just because you got to have some sort of banter going on. It's like skiers versus snowboarders kind of deal.
Yeah.
Something like that.
In good spirit.
Like surfers versus stand-up paddleboarders.
Yeah, versus boogie boarders.
Yeah, that's probably a better.
No. You're on it.
So, you might get hassled a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna fix your stuff.
Have I ever shot a fish on scuba? You better believe it.
I myself as well. I shot my first hogfish, the only hogfish I've ever shot in Jupiter, in Palm Beach County. On scuba, not that long ago, with the homie. You ever heard of the Fish Rules app?
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey Arrington. Yep, went out with him, and
nice.
He convinced me to strap a tank on.
Nice.
We had a freaking awesome day. Sick guy, super good crew. His daughter is a savage diver, savage spearfisher woman, and shot my first hogfish I've ever shot in Jupiter.
There you go. Nice. Dude.
On scuba, bubble blowing.
So we got I like to say we royal we, why not?
It's all inclusive. We can call it we.
So got the new shop, so super stoked. If you guys are looking for anything to kill fish with, you got the new spot.
Yeah, and more importantly, we now have, it's been a long time since we've done a podcast.
Yeah,
like over a year.
Easily
over a year. So more importantly, we now have a permanent home, somewhat permanent at least, for the Xhale podcast.
For sure. It was tough. I can't tell you how many episodes that we did, where we set everything up, but because we're breaking it down and setting it up, although we got really good at it, something would be off. You know, like the audio would be off, or like the video would be off, or
to be fair, we've already.
Well, it's because we've
already had our own issues.
It was the first time that we set it up here, and every time you break it down and set it back up, something isn't plugged in right, or the angle's not right, or the lighting or audio. Yeah, something isn't right. Because believe it or not, this is kind of a DIY operation here. We're not there's no crew in the background. There's no roadies setting up.
Aren't you? I thought you were an audio engineer.
Me, I plugged in the microphone, and I used to wear headphones, so it makes me pretty qualified.
That's fair. That's about the level of qualification for this entire podcast.
It's funny. So I'm a teacher as well, and I feel like way more qualified now because I used all this podcasting gear to do online teaching last year.
Yep.
So we use OBS. Google it, I guess.
It's great software.
Yeah,
it's free.
Best part about it.
I mean, not only is it free, I mean, this probably none of our listeners are interested in the ins and outs of the software that we're using. But
if anyone's listening, start a podcast.
It's very easy.
Start one.
It's very easy. You don't have to have the equipment that we have, but even the equipment that we have is not super sophisticated stuff. I mean, we've got middle ground microphones with like Amazon, eBay special arms, which, by the way, of all the podcasts we've ever done, we have never had a microphone mount. I probably just messed up the entire podcast. We've never had a mount system that worked as good as this.
Nope.
Ever. How many times have we tried to screw the arm mounts into like a plastic folding table, and you crank it all the way down and it just falls off the table and like rips the table apart?
All right, back to spearfishing. All of the times. Literally all of the times. But we're, inside baseball right now.
Yep.
Stoked to be in the new shop. It looks awesome. It pulls spears. The gun wall is insane. The best gun wall in Palm Beach County for sure.
I'll take that.
High-end pole spears, low-end pole spears, gear, merch, hats. Get your Xhale merch.
We do. I've got hats. I've got all three of these trucker hats that you're looking at here. I've got a couple like dad hats and some performance material hats. Long sleeve shirts, like the quick dry shirts. I've got t-shirts, all different colors.
Those like performance long sleeves.
This is something that's never been available. Xhale gear, and it's now available. This is exclusive stuff.
Boom. All right. So that's big news. But I thought today we would talk about the little things when it comes to spearfishing. Because the little things make a huge difference. Little things like the microphone mounts. If you're podcasting, makes a huge difference. And the first thing that I think that we should start off with is bands. And the reason why I wanted to start off with it is it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when I do it to myself. If I see someone else like rotted out bands, it's like, hey man, you do you. But I know if my bands aren't there, where it's at.
Let me slow you down 1 second.
All right.
We're talking about the little things, but these little things in the big picture are going to land you more fish this year.
100%.
That being said, carry on.
All right. So bands make a huge difference. And not only like, is it, your band's going to break? Because if you let it go long enough, will your band break when you go to load it? Absolutely. But the bands are not like batteries. It's not like they're broken or they're working. There is like a downward slope of performance to them.
Yeah.
And that downward slope, it's not that it's not only not effective, it's not hitting the fish, but because the spear isn't moving the way it used to, your point of aim is going to be off. If you are not using like newer bands, I'm not saying you replace them every time you go, but newer bands.
I do that kind of.
Well, you own a freediving shop. It changes the point of your aim. You're not going to be as accurate. You're not going to be hitting fish as hard at the end of the range. Like if you're waiting till it's like cracked around the knot, it's too late.
It's too late. And I don't actually change my bands every time I go diving, but I do change them way more than pretty much everybody. I mean, maybe not everybody. There's a lot of people that care about their bands and stuff like that and do change them a lot. But realistically, I'm probably changing them every couple of months, maybe 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm like consistently using them. I try to dive at least once a week. That doesn't always happen, but let's say maybe I average 3 dives a month, like 3 spearfishing trips a month. That's going to wear your bands out in 3 months for sure.
Oh, 100%.
Might not make a difference. Like you said, it's a gradual slope that the bands are degrading over time at a certain rate. And there might be some exponentiality. Is that a word?
Sure. Can be.
We're gonna make that a word. There might be like a increase in that curve as it gets closer to the end of the life, but it's not really going to make a noticeable difference in how you're shooting the gun or like your point of aim. Like you're probably not going to notice a big difference in that. It's such a gradual difference that every time you go, you're going to kind of account for it naturally. But
I think maybe if you're going once a week, like you are, maybe you can you just subconsciously be like, oh, I'm shooting lower and lower and lower and lower.
I just don't think
I don't get to go out that often.
Yeah,
I go out a third of that.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm trying to get out once a month. I try to get out as much as I can, but it comes out to between like fishing and hunting, and I got 2 kids and a wife, and like if I get out once a month, hey man, I'm doing it. I'm in it. The month to month, especially if I like, leave the gun in the garage where it's hot out. If I leave it in the sun for any amount of time, there's gonna be a noticeable difference in my point of aim. And when I say noticeable, I mean 2.5 inches.
Yeah.
3 inches. But 2.5 inches makes a difference, especially if you're at like the end of the range. So we went diving, the other day. My first drop, I shot a yellow jack, and
A butterjack.
You ever call them butterjacks?
I've never even heard that before.
Oh, dude, butterjacks. That's the thing.
I like that. It is a butterjack.
It is a butterjack, dude.
In every sense of the word.
Yeah.
I'm using that.
Nice. So like the color of butter, the
Bag
texture
it
of
up.
butter. Yeah. So shoot a butterjack at like, 12 feet, something like that.
It was a long shot.
It was a long shot.
Especially for like the setup you were running,
Yeah.
which is a single 5/8 banded 120.
Yeah.
One band, 5/8
One band. If we are we
which
were
is
going.
one of these.
Yeah.
One 5/8 band.
One on a 120. So it's got some stretch, and I let Eric cut the band. So hey yo.
Hey.
I don't know if that came up on the mic, but yeah, train horn. The it had some pop to it, I think it's so I usually cut them at like 20, a little over 26, not 27. So like in that range, when you're tying the knots, let's say it comes out to 26.
Yeah.
Right in there.
Probably about where I cut it. I don't
for
remember.
a 120, and is that tight? Yeah, but I'm only loading one band.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is I can jump in the water, one band. And so in Palm Beach County, we're close as the Gulf Stream gets to any landmass.
Do you run a single or a double wrap?
Double. So I run a double wrap, and it's funny because we just did this podcast that it's not going to get uploaded, so I feel like I'm repeating some of this. I gotta remember what I've repeated.
It's going to be repeated.
So I run a double wrap. Not only do I want to like reach out and touch stuff if I want to take a longer shot, but I went to a seminar with Chris Coates, who's, in my opinion, the man. There's very few people other than Eric that will break out an Excel spreadsheet on spearfishing. And Chris Coates is like the only other person I've ever heard that like runs Excel spreadsheets talking gear.
Xhale spreadsheets?
Excel, sorry. Exhale. We should call them that.
When they're here, they're Xhale spreadsheets for sure.
Yeah. So this guy, Chris Coates, is just the man when it comes to like technically reviewing gear. Like what is actually the best. There's no like gut feeling. There's no. It's like, like.
Yeah, it's not like I shot this gun and this one felt better.
Yeah, no, exactly.
He's probably the only person out there. Not the only. There's a couple, but he's probably one of the easiest sources of information to find for like average divers that are just searching information. unless you're willing to like just dive into some like gnarly forums.
Yeah.
And even then it's pretty difficult to find, but he's probably one of the only guys that's like putting actual data, like real recorded data out about how different setups shoot.
And so his findings for accuracy were that a double, he's only shooting fish within that length, the range of that single wrap, but he found that as the spear came tight on the single wrap, it affected the accuracy. It pulled the bottom of the shaft down, so it would affect the accuracy basically.
Yeah.
So he always runs a double wrap. Not that he's shooting out to 20 feet or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's just that it's
gives you that much
more
more slack.
accurate within that shorter range.
That's fair.
So
I've
I always
always
run a double wrap.
I've always been under the impression, and to be honest, I run double wraps on pretty much everything, with exception of a couple of very small guns that I have. But I've always thought to myself, like, I rarely shoot a fish in like a range that I would need a double wrap.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I've ever shot a fish that's so far away that I'm like maxing out a double wrap.
Yeah.
99% of the fish I've shot were within single wrap range. And I've always thought to myself, like, well, is it worth having the double wrap? And my excuse for using the double wrap, I've never even thought about what you just said, but it does make sense, is I have that much more line for abrasion resistance, because I'm usually, most of the time I'm running a reel setup, and I have a tendency to run cheaper line on my reel than I run for my shooting line. So I like to shoot Dyneema, so I'm shooting like Aussie line, right? Like the 1.9 or 2 mil cord Dyneema. So it's very abrasion resistant. In a single wrap, a fish is liable to suck your single wrap into a reef or a wreck or whatever. But if you have a double, now you got that much more line to give you like a buffer zone of abrasion versus, you know, a lot of times I'll just run polyester line for reel line because it's cheaper and you don't really need a bunch of abrasion resistance in your reel. So
Yeah.
that's my excuse for doing it. But those two things combined are pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good reasons.
And on some guns, like I have like that single band gun is like my reef cobia gun.
Yeah.
So if I'm diving the reef or we're resetting a lot, I personally unload my gun every time we reset.
Yeah.
So I don't want to load 2 bands every time.
Yeah.
I'm just loading that one, and I've shot, you know, decent sized kingfish to little butterjacks, all with that single band. You know,
Yep. I've seen you shoot a kingfish with that same gun with an old band on it. Old not only in the amount of time that it's spent on the gun, but also in the amount of time that it's spent in the closet.
So that's a good point too, is when you, and this is another thing that I didn't really think about until I went to a Chris Coates seminar at Blue Wild. And if you guys have the opportunity to go to Blue Wild, but make sure you hit the seminars. I feel like that is where you get the most bang for your buck. You know, going and talking to retailers is fun, and you get to like look at cool products and talk and shop is cool, but it really getting to pick the brain of somebody that like a Chris Coates, that like this is his like life's work, you know, and getting the opportunity to hear what that guy has to say, ask him questions, and you know, kind of yuck it up with him is an opportunity that not everyone gets. So like,
yeah,
that's why I like the Blue Wild. But he made a big stink about rubber that sits on the shelf, and it's a natural product. Like it's gonna degrade just like, you know, yesterday's leftovers. Anything else is gonna degrade, and so on that 120 I used to run. It started out with it's an old green handle Rob Allen, and when I got the gun, it had
gun.
I literally love that gun. It's my I call it my 90% gun because 90% of the time that's the gun I'm running.
Anybody out there with a Rob Allen green handle that you don't want anymore, bring it by the shop and I will buy it from you.
There you go.
Carry on.
There you go. So when I bought it, it had a 3/4 band on it. I was like, cool, whatever. 3/4 is 2 5/8, right? Duh. And don't check my math. And so whatever. I ran the band that I got it with, and then when it came time to replace it, I just replaced it with the 3/4. But loading that 3/4 wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And so I went down to the 11/16. but I felt like I was like cheating myself, like, oh man, it's not going to have the same amount of power.
Yeah.
But I was blasting everything with it.
It was a shorter band.
Yeah, because it was a shorter band and it was all the power that I needed.
Yeah. That's a whole nother thing. We could do it. I could do an entire podcast on the difference in band thickness and length and what the differences that makes and how it shoots on a spray gun. That gets into some detail.
For sure. Detail. You stretch 100 feet of 3/4, 2 feet, it ain't going to have much recoil.
No. Or much chooch.
Not a lot of chooch. But you stretch, 6 inches of 5/8.
Yeah.
2
It's
feet.
the whole concept behind a roller gun, right? You're pushing the shaft for a longer distance. Not only are you stretching the rubber farther, which on a roller gun, I mean, technically you're stretching the rubber like a higher percentage, but it's less about the percentage of stretch and more about like the amount of distance that you're accelerating that shaft for, right? So the shorter your band, the longer you're going to be transferring energy into the shaft. So like, for example, on a standard gun, and I'm pointing over there because there's rifle arrows on the wall. One of the best gun setups I've ever shot.
No, that's not the rifle arrow.
No, Rifle Marauder, which is a bad to the bone spear gun. One of my favorite setups was a rifle arrow, 110 centimeter, but the length of the gun didn't have much to do with it. With 2 9/16 bands, so all the rifle arrows come stock with 5/8, right? I put 2 9/16, but like significantly shorter. I was running like 400% stretch on standard bands, which is on a 5/8 on a standard gun is almost impossible to load. I mean, I'm sure some people can, but I definitely cannot. I took everything I had to load 2 9/16 at 400%. But that gun, because of like the length of acceleration, the power stroke is actually, I think Coates coined that kind of term, is the power stroke of the gun, the distance it's accelerating for, was so long that gun just was a laser beam. Powerful, accurate, very little recoil, very manageable. No, it was on a 110 centimeter rifle arrow.
Oh, just standard gun.
Yeah, standard gun, 2 9/16 spans, 400, and maybe a little under 400, but close to 400% stretch. I was running like
that's maxing it out.
20 inch band, like maybe 21.5 inch bands on a 110, which was insane.
Insane. I wouldn't want to load that.
But that thing shot better than most guns I've ever shot.
Yeah. So I had 11/16 on there for a while.
Yeah,
and
I was kind of getting off track.
Yeah, no.
That's what we're here for.
We're already off track. We're talking about 11/16 bands when we should be talking about changing your freaking bands out.
Yeah.
So I had the 11/16 bands on there, and same thing, was shooting everything, not really worried about the power, and that kind of broke me on like, hey man, maybe on the reef, what I need is just quick shots. What I need is to be accurate.
Yeah.
Accuracy was the key. I never want to miss.
That single banded 120, right, or Rob Allen, is a fantastic reef gun for around here.
Dude, it is perfect. So, let's say we're diving a wreck. The wreck's 100 feet long. You're doing 5 knots. You know how long it takes to go 100 feet doing 5 knots? Like, you get 2 dives, like, you do 2 drops. That was a good drift, And we're deep enough to where, like, I want to be able to reach out with that 120.
Yep.
And I just love that gun. But I was shooting everything with the 11/16, and I realized, man, I'm blowing through stuff as long as I hit it right. I just have to hit it right. And so then the shop that I was getting the bands from, that no one else was buying 11/16. I was like the one guy that bought 11/16 there.
There's very few people buying 3/4.
Yeah.
And even less buying 11/16. It's like a very obscure size of rubber.
So the rubber was like
here.
it was like 3 years old
Europe,
on the
it's
shelf.
More popular.
And it was,
it was older than that, dude.
Yeah.
Older than 3 years.
And I could notice a huge difference with it.
6 years old. Maybe older than that.
It probably was.
It might have. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came to me and was like, no, you're wrong. It was actually 10 years old. That rubber could have been 10 years old.
The amber was like the color of this gun. It was hot dog.
That hot dog amber.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, this isn't going to work. You know, like it wasn't. I was like, a new 5/8 band is going to be the same as this old 11/16. So I went to 5/8 and I could load it super easy. I didn't have to like fight it. It's super easy is relative. You know, like loading a spear gun's never fun. If it's easy, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
But I only have to do it once. You know, it's one banded gun. And man, I shoot, it's my 90% gun. 90% of the time I'm using that gun.
The key factor with that gun, and this is kind of getting a little bit more back on track to what we're supposed to be talking about, is that with that single 5/8, you have to keep that 5/8 bands that 5/8 band fresh.
And that's another. So when I'm saying I notice a difference in the point of aim, is I definitely do. Yeah. Like I will start missing stuff if that band is old.
Yeah, and that gun is a good example of like the extremes. Like you definitely notice more loss of power and loss or difference of point of aim with a single banded gun because you're relying on that one band versus a double banded gun where you're making up for a little bit more power with two bands, obviously, or roller guns where you have a lot more power stroke or whatever setup you're running with more than one band. But the point of the matter is bands degrade very quickly. That natural latex, its life cycle starts as soon as it goes from a liquid rubber to a solid rubber. It starts its life cycle right there. And you got to figure it gets made into a band at the factory, ships to a dive or probably to a distributor and then to a dive store, or maybe through several distributors and then to a dive store, sits on a shelf for a while, they make a band, so on and so forth. So that rubber has already got some age on it by the time it gets into the hands of the consumer. But really the way I like to look at it is any decent dive shop should take pretty good care of their rubber. Like the the shelf life of bands is way more forgiving than once you put the band on a spear gun.
I will say that you're absolutely right. It is way more forgiving, but I've seen shops that have like giant rolls of rubber. Yeah. That just, like we were saying, that 3/4 rubber is hot dog. Yeah. That 5/8 gets used a lot more for sure, but if you're guessing, you know, a year, 2 years worth of rubber. If you're buying 2 years worth of rubber in a throw and then you're off, like that's not good. Yeah. What I like about your shop, man, is you're like really conscious of like how much rubber am I going to go through in the next couple months. Yeah. Like let's buy this amount. Yeah, and I'm not gonna buy like sizes of rubber that aren't selling, you know. And then the one person that comes in that wants to buy it and it's been on the shelf for a year, and it's hot dog. I don't want to keep rubber around. Like if somebody really needs like an obscure size, like I'll order it for you, and it'll get here in you know 5 or 6 days or whatever. And you want to talk about extremes? We're talking about a spear gun where you're stretching it way out. Mm-hmm. You on a Hawaiian sling or a pole spear where you're getting 100% stretch. On a Hawaiian sling, maybe you're getting 50% stretch. Like you're not getting a lot, right? No, like you're taking it from your elbow to your shoulder. Like I don't know what that is, but that's not a lot. And probably about 100. Probably about 100%. It makes a huge difference there. And I see people with like right where it's like tied to the sling, it's like all cracked and nasty, and it's like, well, I don't think it'll break. So here's the thing. Yeah, probably won't break. With cracked bands, if your band is cracked, you're way beyond the point that it should have been replaced. Like way beyond. Yeah. Just because the band holds doesn't mean it's still good. Yeah. If your band is cracking, and they always start at like the wishbone knot, right, where it's tied into the band because that's where there's constant stress there. All those little cracks, they go into the band. Like they're changing the diameter of the band, right? So as that crack goes around, if it's a 5/8 band and you have a crack that's half the depth of the band, that's a little extreme. But for example's sake, you've just lost half of the cross section of the band. Yeah. And that, when I say cross section, like the actual surface area of the band, if you cut it, that's where your power comes from. It's as that band is stretching, the cross section shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, and when you shoot, it expands back out. And that
is the stretch of the band, and like a kind of a weird description of it.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it in my head. But as soon as you start taking away from that, the band is like significantly losing power at that point.
For sure.
So freshen up your bands.
Step one, especially on pole spears and Hawaiian slings.
And it's so much cheaper on pole spears and slings. So it's like, just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. It's not going to cost you that much money. Even on a spear gun, you're good. So let's say everybody should be replacing their bands at least once a year. Everybody, at least.
Minimum.
That's the bare minimum.
You're going on a Bahama. You owe it. Forget you owe it to the fish, because you do owe it to the fish, but you owe it to yourself. How much money are you spending to go out there doing it? You've done all this work to put yourself in the right spot, and the fish shows up.
Yeah.
And now you're gonna cheap out
$1,000 in fuel.
Yeah, and you're gonna cheap out on $5 that would have gotten you the dang fish. Like spend the whatever it is, $20 on a gun band, $5 on a Hawaiian sling band.
Yeah, it is so worth the money to keep your bands fresh. I can't even express it. But moving on from the bands, and we're gonna go through like a few different things that you need to keep fresh on your gun. But before I was talking about when we were talking about shooting double wraps and single wraps, and I shoot a double for the extra abrasion buffer zone. If you have abrasion on your shooting line of any type, regardless of the type of shooting line, whether it's Dyneema, like this stuff, or mono, like the stuff that's on all these guns over here.
Gun right here.
Especially mono. But if you have any kind of abrasion situation going on, that's the next thing. And you want to talk about cheap to replace, just change the shooting line on your gun. Put new stuff on it. Put new mono on it.
If you have mono, don't change it yourself. Bring it to a shop.
Yeah, bring it
because like the crimps make a difference. If you're learn how to crimp by watching an expert do it, because a bad crimp is it affects the strength of the line significantly. Yeah. And so does like any little hairs, nicks. It's like freaking how much you charge for a single wrap of mono?
Not even $8.
Yeah.
Less than $8.
Less than $8. So it's $5 to come get some new shooting line. Roughly.
Yeah.
Come get some new shooting line. If you have like little hair, because as soon as you have any little nick in, especially mono, it's like a tear in a piece of paper. If you can pull on a piece of paper and it's pretty resilient, but you put a little tear in that paper, now all of a sudden it's got like a weakness, a little crack in the armor, and whoosh, you can rip it right apart. So
watch out for that marauder.
I'm telling you, mono is especially can be especially fragile.
Yeah, mono is great. It actually, I switch back and forth shooting mono and Dyneema all the time. I generally end up preferring Dyneema, but mono is especially susceptible to abrasion, and it's a great material to use for a shooting line because it shoots very fast. It's very low drag, shoots great, doesn't pull your point of aim down.
Amazing.
Shoots fantastic. But as soon as it has a nick in it, it's called monofilament for a reason. It's literally one consistent strand of plastic, and as soon as it gets a nick in it, you've cut that strand. And once it has a break, that's where it's going to fail.
Yeah.
If you have a nick in your mono that's 15% of the width, that's 15% of the line strength taken away.
Yeah. Yeah, there's our buddy Captain Jack Spiro on
Who
YouTube,
shoots mono.
I remember him coming in and he hadn't replaced his band. He like kind of cheaped out on it and lost just a monster wahoo. I'm like, dude, that sucks for you. That sucks for the fish.
Jack can tell you a great story about mono and not replacing it when he should have, because he lost a wahoo that he shot with a mono shooting line that had like, I don't know the specifics on it. We should have Jack on, actually. He'd be a great guy to have on. I've been doing all the work on Jack's guns lately, and he's been shouting me out on his YouTube channel, which
nice.
Props to him. He has a great YouTube thing going.
Well, you're paying it back.
But this was a few years ago, and he had like spliced in a section of mono. Like his shooting line had broke. and he crimped it where it broke and crimped in another section. So it was like, you know, in the whole thing, there was like 4 or 5 crimps in the whole setup, and shot a wahoo, and obviously it just came right apart because like an inline crimp, like pulling end to end, just doesn't work.
Yeah.
A looped crimp is one thing, but yeah, that doesn't work. So after that, I think he actually switched to Dyneema, and then got frustrated with the Dyneema, and I think he switched back to mono now. But he's been pretty good at every time he brings his gun in to get a new band or whatever. I always just put new mono on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I ain't even playing.
Yeah.
I'm putting new mono on the gun. I'm not even gonna tell him. I just charge him on the thing.
There you go. Yeah, if you're getting mono, if you're bringing your gun to a shop, just replace the mono.
Yeah, you're talking about $5 on your bill or $8, whatever.
If I'm shooting pelagic stuff, I prefer mono.
Mono's
But because
great
I'm
for
going
pelagics.
back and forth to like reef and pelagics and whatever, I like the Dyneema just for that a little bit of abrasion resistance. You get a little bit of wiggle room where you don't really have it with mono.
You know what I really like about mono for pelagic, and actually, this mono is a really good example. This is 300-pound mono, and if you feel it, it's a lot softer than like what you would expect for 300-pound mono, and it actually is like real. I mean, mono is stretchy on its own, even normal 300-pound, but this is 300 pounds, a lot stiffer. But it kind of like plays in with your bungee setup. If you're shooting wahoo and stuff like that,
if you have a double wrap, there'll be some stretching there.
yeah,
for
absolutely. Sure. A fish like a wahoo when it's running will definitely stretch your mono shooting line out.
I kind of like that mono stiff because when I'm re-wrapping the double wrap, like you got like not the
it's
kinks,
it's a lot
but
easier
like
to wrap. Yeah.
you just like put it, it's like boom, boom, it like falls into place.
Yeah,
it's
a
got
lot
that
easier to wrap.
memory to it.
That's in my opinion, that's one of the biggest advantages to mono for any setup is that re-wrapping the gun is a breeze.
Yeah, it's got
all my
that
little tiny guns, like the gun I use for shooting in holes and stuff, like down in the keys.
Yeah.
And like the real shallow stuff, shooting red groupers and whatever. Single wrap guns with mono. It's a no-brainer.
See, good memory.
There you go, dude.
That's it.
So fast to wrap. It doesn't. You can even shoot the gun with no wrap on it, and the line's not going to get tangled up because it just kind of hangs there on its own. It's mono definitely has its pros for sure.
Yeah. Super fast.
But whether you're shooting mono or Dyneema, make sure that stuff is fresh. Make sure it's not frayed up. You know, I can't even tell you how many times I've seen people lose fish because they shoot and their shooting line breaks on the reef, in blue water, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just replace the stuff. We're talking about super small things.
I was saying we were diving the other day when I shot that butterjack. We were diving the other day and a guy just went to unload his gun by just blasting it out. And poof.
Lost a shot. I saw a kid do that the other day.
Yeah, it banged the end of his shooting line. And
Hunter.
And you
freaking long-haired scrag.
And yeah, sent the shaft to Davy Jones' locker, never to be seen again.
Is that who you're talking about? Yeah. Hunter. God, Jupiter scum.
Bum.
Just kidding, buddy. We love you.
So like it can happen. You know, it can happen.
Yeah, and
check your knots if you're running Dyneema. Figure out what your knot is.
Learn the right knots.
Yeah,
don't get if you're tying shoe knots on it. No, dude.
You need
look at if there's one. Actually, we have a video. Go back in the Xhale archives on YouTube. There's a video called, I don't even know what it's called. Top 3 knots you need to know for spearfishing, something like that. This knot right here, I'm sure you can't see it from there. I call it the South African quick release because my South African buddy taught it to me. That's one of the best knots you can learn for spearfishing. Whether you're tying to mono or Dyneema, whatever, your reel line, that's a quick release knot. That thing is money. Learn that. Learn how to tie a bowline because that's probably the most universal
like
knot for anything.
Yeah.
And a double figure 8. I do use like a different knot for tying to the shaft, so I tie something different. But it's essentially a bowline. It's a little bit fancier version of a bowline. If you can tie a bowline, you're good to go. You can tie anything. You can do all your rigging if you can tie a bowline. That one knot.
I use double figure 8. The guy
to the shaft.
Not always to the shaft because it's if I'm using like Aussie line for my shooting line, it's a little bit bulky of a knot.
Yeah, that's why I don't tie it.
But Q line, I'm not gonna say Aussie line is Q line, but the guy that makes Q-Line,
Dynamo.
Dynamo, he like his warranty basically is all about it, dude. If you didn't tie a double figure eight, then we're not honoring nothing.
Yeah. Double figure eight is the highest tensile strength retention knot that you can tie on a piece of line. Bonafide facts. I don't know if that's changed since I learned that fact, but as far as I know,
it's up there.
like it's when you tie a knot in line, it weakens the line, and a double figure eight is the highest original strength retention that you can use.
I'm trying to think of what it. So in mono, it's there. I'm trying to think of what the name it's called in mono, but it's
improved clinch knot.
No, it's not a uni knot, because with uni knot's what I kind of always go with. So,
but you're not tying mono.
No, I know.
Let's just put that out there. If you're tying mono onto your shaft,
you've already broken it.
Please come to the store.
Yeah, you're not tying 300-pound mono.
No.
Like that's not a thing.
No. Was there something else? Was there another small thing that makes a big difference?
So I think that
sharpening tips.
Yeah, so I think
Is that where you're
fresh
going?
bands. Fresh bands are number one. Shooting line's for me. Fresh bands are number one.
Yep.
Shooting line is number two. And then keeping a sharp tip is number three.
Yep.
It makes a much bigger difference than what people give it credit for.
Yeah. Huge difference. Kind of. I would say so.
Yeah.
But much bigger than people give it credit for. A lot of that comes down to like the type of tip too, right? So
what do you prefer, a round tip or like the pyramid, faceted?
I prefer what I would call a tri-cut. I guess that could be more than three. Typically, it's 3 facets, right?
Yeah, I've seen like a pulse here like 8.
Yeah.
So fast.
That's a little excessive.
No, I mean, trocar.
The more facets you have, the steeper the angle of the edge of the facet, right? Where the facets meet.
Yeah.
So if you have 8, like every time you add one, it opens up that angle. So you lose like the sharpness of the cutting edge. That's why I prefer a tri-cut. A tri-cut's the sharpest one you're going to do. A bi-cut would be sharper, but I've never even heard of that.
There was a spearfishing company that made an adapter for broadheads.
Yep. What was that on the Poseidon pole spears? Yeah. Shout out. Leave a comment if you know what a Poseidon pole spear is.
Which I imagine, like, I feel like I breathe on my broadheads and they rust. So like I can't imagine what that's like in the saltwater environment. But
as well as if you
look
at it long enough, it dulls.
Yeah, and there's no flopper. It's like a cool idea, terrible idea. I'm sure the guy.
It's a cool idea.
I'm sure he had like a way to make it like work really well.
Yeah,
I hope, because in my head I'm like, dude, I got a freaking razor broadhead on the end of the pole spear. That's sick. But there's no like retention mechanism. Like you blast like a perfect, a
broad, like let's say a broadhead has like a 1-inch cutting diameter.
Yeah.
So you shoot that through a fish, and now you've got 1 inch of like holding, but you also put a 1-inch hole through it. So.
Yeah, it's not like a deer where you're like you plugged it with a 1-inch hole and
you don't want it to stay in.
Yeah, now it's bleeding out. Like a fish, it's gonna bleed out. Like you killed it, but you killed it a mile. Yeah, a mile down the reef.
Oh man.
So a sharp tip definitely makes a difference. I like the cutting edge too. Yeah. There's a reason why like I shoot Muzzy 3-bladed trocar tips. There's trocar fishing hooks. Like Owner makes a trocar fishing hook. There's like laser cut fishing hooks. They cut on the way in.
Sharpness makes a huge difference.
And the whole idea of those is that they cut going in.
Yep.
So if you're not keeping it sharp, then it's not cutting on the way in. Then you're losing out on like the principle of why this thing works.
Yeah. So when it comes to tips, pencil point, or I still don't really understand like what
pencil
makes
point's
a rock tip,
but
I think that's general consensus.
Yeah.
a rock tip or a pencil point, just like a round grind, I think it's the easiest one to sharpen. I know you have a little bit different input on this, but wait, we'll get there. I think the tri-cut is a little bit more difficult to sharpen if you want to sharpen it really well. And this is actually going to dive into like where I think the tri-cut performs the most, where you're going to notice the most difference in how well it penetrates a fish is on a Hawaiian sling, where your velocities are way lower. So having that extra penetration actually makes a huge difference in how well the shaft is going to go through a fish.
For sure. And so same thing for me, and this is why I think the tri-cut is easier to sharpen for me, is because most of the time I'm doing it in the Bahamas, because having a sharp spear makes a huge difference, and that's where I'm dulling my spear the most, because, you know, I'd like to say that I just stone the fish every time, but occasionally with a Hawaiian sling, I'll miss.
Occasionally.
It's
pretty rare.
It's happened.
Pretty rare. I've heard that you've never even lost a Hawaiian sling shaft.
Anyone who says that hasn't put enough time in with Hawaiian sling shafts. Because if you say you've never lost a Hawaiian sling shaft, you need to sling some more shafts. Because eventually you're gonna shoot a black grouper that isn't holed up right in the anus, and it is going to be gone. Or, you know, or maybe you just have better restraint than I do, because sometimes I'll see like a big old, you know, like amberjack, some big old jack roll through, and I just can't help myself but to plug that thing.
Dude, regardless of shooting fish, I've lost more Hawaiian sling shafts just dropping them in like 90 feet.
Oh,
and you're like, I'm not getting that.
You ever take a shot on a mutton in the grass, like a Hail Mary shot, and miss on a mutton in the grass? That shaft is now an inch under the sand, but an inch under the sand in a general vicinity of it, under, you know, it's under sand, under all the turtle grass. Like,
yeah, that's a goner.
That's a goner.
Anyway, so what's your sharpening technique?
So if I think that you're right that a round tip, a rock point, is either to sharpen if you have power tools, because you can mount. Let's say you have a grinding wheel, you mount the grinding wheel, and you just spin the shaft.
I've got a great tool for it. Reach in that cardboard box. Grab that thing. This is one of my new favorite tools right here.
Boom.
It's like a belt sander in your hand.
Yeah, mini belt sander. Yeah, that thing is
sick.
pretty slick.
That's the best
Knife
thing.
and tool sharpener.
Especially for tri-cuts. That's a great.
Yeah.
If you're really good at like hand sharpening tri-cuts, that's a great tool.
So if you have like
you got to come to the shop for me to sharpen.
If you have a bench grinder, that round, you just get a solid, you know, like brace, you brace it, and then you just spin it, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Roughly, you have to make sure it's centered, especially on a spear gun. But for me, if I'm in the Bahamas, the chances of me bringing a bench grinder to the Bahamas are about 0.
Slim to none.
Slim to none. So
erring on the none side.
I might have a file, depending on what kind of boat I'm on.
Slim to none.
Slim to none, though. So what do I have? I have the seawall. So I can hop on the seawall, you know, cut up the fish, you know, hanging out with my friends, drinking some water after the dive, and I can take out my shaft, find the flat, you know, you gotta have a little bit of feel to it, and you feel the flat edge, and then you rub it on the seawall.
Yeah.
And
you've been practicing that motion your whole life.
My entire life, at least since 10. And what's nice about it is that cement that isn't crazy grit, so it goes slow enough to where it's hard to mess it up. So like you got to put some elbow grease into it.
Let me ask you this: do you get it started on the seawall?
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking? Like a 600 grit?
I would say a seawall is like a 300 grit.
300.
250 grit. Maybe.
Do you then finish it out on like a conch shell?
Ooh.
Or,
you know, I might go seawall to like the shell rock right next to the seawall. Nah, that would dull it. Maybe seawall to the boat next to me is gunnel. You know, it's a t-shirt.
It's a t-shirt.
Yeah.
You got to get that, maybe a leather strap.
That's what the belt. That's what the belt's for. Yeah, break out the leather belt.
Nice.
I knew that I was gonna like Eric. Here's a little fun fact about Eric. I knew I was gonna like Eric because when we met, we were talking about knife sharpening, and he whips off his belt, and he had like sharpening like goop on the inside of his belt that he just constantly rocks in case he had to just strop out that knife real quick. And that is
time, dude.
And that is not an exaggeration. That is a stone cold fact that if you see Eric wearing a leather belt, he's got like pocket knife.
I got not even half, maybe like this much of the belt with like a lapping compound rubbed into it, and then the rest is just raw leather. You got to finish on the raw leather. But the belt's great because you can do it anywhere. You take it off, you get a good foot up, and you can put the belt buckle on your toe and stretch that thing out and just get a good. It's pretty good.
You're the biggest nerd Boy Scout, Eagle Scout.
Make sure I didn't knock anything out of play here. We're still running.
No, we're still running.
Good.
So fun fact about Eric.
It
But
works, dude. Hey,
yeah. So keeping your tip
who's
sharp.
got the sharpest knives around?
You do for
I'm
sure,
telling
man.
you.
For sure. You know when like old men are like complimenting you on your knives. You're like, dang. Nice.
I've had that happen.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying it.
like just the most decrepit, crustiest old man's like, you got a knife, Hakamara? Oh man, this thing's real sharp. I'm like, yeah.
So I think there's a huge advantage to keeping the spear sharp. I think that gets drastically underplayed. I know when we're on a boat and there's like a bunch of spear shafts just like, you know, tucked on the side of the boat, people are just like grabbing random ones. I'm like, oh no, I want my one. Yeah. Because like I don't want your
dude,
like
I'm a stickler on
I
that.
don't want your dull one. Plus
I'm
it's
such a stickler.
I don't want to go from like 6 mil to 8 mil to 7 mil to, you know, like I want my shaft that I've dialed in and that I know is sharp because it makes a huge difference.
I used to I'm talking a long time ago when not that, I guess it was a pretty long time ago now. When I was in high school and I started like really diving, spearfishing in the Bahamas with my buddy Andy. And most of the time I was going over there and spearfishing, it was with Andy. And he had a PVC pipe, I'm sure he still has it actually, full of Hawaiian sling shafts. And we would go to the store and buy like 3 or 4 shafts at a time, or, you know, whatever we would need for like the upcoming trip. But we would store them, all of our shafts together in this PVC pipe with like, it had a threaded cap on it, and you'd empty half a can of WD-40 in there and screw it back on. So they were just like bathing in grease to keep them like long life. But I was so picky, and it was one of those things that like I would never say anything. Like I would just immediately open the thing when we got to the Bahamas and like pick my 3 shafts. There would be like 20 in there, and I'd pick my 3 out and be like, put those aside somewhere so nobody else uses them, because I know like those are my shafts.
Yeah.
But I'd like pick through them all and be like, is that one mine? Like look at the sharpening job. I'm like, yeah, that one's mine.
give it a little flopper test, you know, make sure that flopper is good too.
And Andy would just like reach in and grab whatever, just start launching shafts anyway.
That's another little thing.
But he shot just as many fish as I did, so it really
sure.
didn't matter.
The another thing to keep in mention, we're talking about little things, is tuning your flopper. That makes a huge difference too, man. You don't want a flopper that isn't gonna flop open. Yeah, it's got to be floppy. Yeah, but you want it to peg open. You don't want it to like.
Be careful though.
It's got to have like, I want it like real loose in here, and then like real tight. I want it loose to tight. For sure. Yeah, there can be too little and there can be too much. Yeah. And it's one of those things, flopper tuning, anybody can do it. It's like knife sharpening. Anybody can sharpen a knife, but there's definitely an art to it. Like you got to have the touch to get it just right. And it's easy to mess up. And it's hard to correct.
It's 4 times as hard to correct than it is to get right. And if you get it wrong and it's too wrong, you might even have to replace the flopper on it.
Yeah, it's like adding bleach to laundry. Like a little bit's not going to do anything. It's like a little bit. Perfect. It's like nothing. Perfect. You ruined all your
Everything's
clothes. Yeah, exactly. So you really gotta like get it right. And the way that I test it is, I mean, it's no secret, but I like spin it in my hands.
Yep.
Shink, and it should peg out. And I want to be able to like drop it, like bang it on the ground, and have it still be pegged out. If I spin it and it doesn't come out, then it's too tight. If I drop it and it stays.
See, I even go a little bit beyond that. Like, and that even just in the testing process, there's kind of like an art to that as well. It's because everybody will spin it different and like hit it different, like with different strengths.
Yeah.
So I'll like bounce it on the ground and bounce it a little bit harder and a little bit harder until I feel like I bounce it hard enough that the flopper should fall. And I like try and dial it in that way. So like I'll spin it. If it doesn't lock open with like a light spin, I mean, it shouldn't take much for it to stick out. But then it's got to like, the flopper's got to drop at the perfect bounce. If it doesn't,
that'd be a fun podcast, man. How to dial in a flopper.
That's a very subjective thing as well.
I think if you just do rough ideas.
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, I think we wrap this one up, man. So change your bands. If they're cracking, it's time to go for sure. But hopefully you're doing it before then. So change your bands.
Change bands.
It affects your accuracy, your power, affects everything. Change your bands. They go bad way before you think they do. Next one is change your shooting line. If your shooting line breaks, you're done for the day. Like I know there's some people that are like, oh, I have an extra shaft. Like, are you really bringing an extra shaft with you?
You know what I find funny is people that bring an extra shaft that doesn't have shooting line on it.
Oh, just free shafting from here. Yeah.
Sick. You brought an extra shaft.
Right. So shooting line, replace your shooting line. Keep your tip sharp. It makes a huge difference. And if you want us to get into the real nuance, tune your floppers. Because flopper gang for life, forget a slip tip. That's a whole nother podcast.
Oh man, we actually talked about that on the first go around.
Yeah.
But we'll bring that up on a new one.
Nice.
Episode 2.
Boom.
Season 6? 5?
12? 1?
Something. We'll call it Season 1, Episode 1. Thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode of the Xhale Podcast. Welcome back to the Xhale Podcast. And you break it, you buy it.
Sorry, Craig.
Welcome to the Xhale Spearfishing store. Come by the store if you're local here in Jupiter or just in Florida. Come by, say hey. Let me make some bands, sharpen your tip, put new shooting line on your gun. And until then, we'll see you in the next video.
See you guys.